Everything we are going to learn today, we are going to learn it in a way that you can apply it directly to your profession and to your workspace. Basic human anatomy, we are going to discuss the skeletal system, we are going to discuss the muscular system, and we're also going to discuss kinesiology. So I'm going to start with the skeletal system now. In the skeletal system, we're going to discuss about the skeleton. The skeleton is the basic framework of the human body, and we have various functions, the formations, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to start with definition. Basically, we have basically 206 bones in the body. And the skeleton is the framework of the human body, as I've said earlier. It provides several functions in the human body. For example, it provides structure and shape. The reasons why we are shaped as the way we are is because of the skeleton. The reason why we are structured the way we are is because of the skeleton. And this is across different species in the world. So among birds, the reason why they're shaped as birds is because of their skeleton. We have 5 key functions of the skeleton, and I'm going to list them down now. And the first one is muscle attachment. So we have 1, muscle attachment. So basically, the muscles in our body are attached to our bones. What connects the muscles to the bone is the tendon, and we are going to talk about that later on in the basic human anatomy, this module. And also, another function for the skeleton is protection of vital organs. So we have protection. Protection of vital organs, such as the skull protects the brain, the ribs protect organs like the heart, the liver, and so many other organs. The pelvic girdle or pelvis protects the reproductive organs, protects the bladder, and so on and so forth. So that's for protection. Another key function is storage. So we have storage. The skeleton or the bones itself, they store chemicals like calcium, phosphorus that are needed in our lives. That are needed for nutrition also. Thank you. The fourth one is production of blood cells. So in the bone marrows, red blood cells are formed. So we can understand when people talk about sucking on bone marrows and all sorts of chickens and stuff, is because of red blood cells are produced in those bone marrows. So production, which is one of the key functions. The fifth one is shape and structure. The reason why we are shaped the way we are is because of the skeleton, and the reason why birds are shaped the way they are is because of their own skeleton. And for example, this is an example of the skeleton of a human being. So the reason why we are shaped the way we are or structured the way we are is because of the way our bones are arranged. So the fifth one is shape and structure. So now I want to talk to you about body types. We have 3 major body types of the body. So they are mesomorph, they are endomorph, and ectomorph. When people come into the gym, I can give you an example. You have 2 friends. Mrs. A and Mrs. B are both sisters. They both weigh 80 kg, and they start working out the same intensity, the same time, the same frequency. And after 3 weeks, Mrs. A loses 10 kg and becomes 70 kg. Mrs. B loses just 2 kg and becomes 78 kg. And Mrs. B is annoyed with you or confused as at why she's not losing as much as her friend. So what you can use to explain this is because of her body type. So for example, an ectomorph is someone that easily loses weight, or it's hard for the person to gain weight. That's what an ectomorph is. While an endomorph is someone that easily gains weight and is easy for them, and it's hard for them to lose weight. So when an ectomorph comes into the gym, like Mrs. A, she doesn't have to do as much as what Mrs. B does, who is an endomorph, to lose weight. So she does this and works out with 10 reps, 10 reps for 2 sets, and Mrs. B does the same 20 reps or 10 reps for 2 sets, and you can see that Mrs. A has lost more calories than Mrs. B. So the best way to explain it is that people that are ectomorph are those that easily lose weight, while people that are endomorph are those that easily gain weight. Okay, another thing to help you with your explanation is ectomorph people are usually those that are taller, they have longer limbs from appearance, and also while for endomorph people are those that are rounded, they have round heads, they have shorter limbs. While for mesomorph, which is the third particular body type, are those that easily gain muscle mass. So you can have two friends also, as an example, Mr. B and Mr. C. Mr. B and Mr. C comes into the gym and they want to increase their chest circumference. So they want to make the muscle mass around their chest to be bigger than the way it is. And so what you see is that Mr. B lifts the same amount of weight that Mr. C is carrying, and they are not increasing at the same rate. So you get to the point that they are confused, or maybe they are confused. What you can use to explain to them is that Mr. B, who gains more muscle mass, is a mesomorph, while Mr. C, who doesn't gain as much, is not a mesomorph. So you can see that an endomorph and ectomorph easily loses weight, an endomorph easily gains weight, while a mesomorph easily gains muscle mass. These three things are not just structured or close-ended like this. So because we can have people that are ectomesomorph, we can have people that are endomesomorph, we can have different categories. So for an endomesomorph means that can easily gain muscle mass, but it is hard for them to lose weight. Or for an ectomesomorph is can easily lose weight, but can also easily gain muscle mass. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is ossification, or bone formation. So every time you hear a word ossification or you hear bone formation, they are basically the same thing. Ossification is the process at which bone is formed. Bone formation is the process at which bone is formed. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I'm going to give you three things that you have to understand in bone formation or bone growth, maintenance, and development. So the three things are the three cells. We have the osteocytes, we have the osteoblast, and the osteoclasts. The osteoblasts are those that are the bone forming cells, while the osteocytes are bone matured cells or matured bone cells, and osteoclasts are those that break down and absorb bone cells. So let me write it down. We have the osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and osteocytes. So as I've said, the osteoblast is the bone forming cell. The osteoclast is the bone reabsorbing cell, while the osteocytes are matured bone cells. So at every single point in our lives, these three cells are always working. So let me give you an example, an illustration of how this works. So we have a bone cell. Imagine this is a bone cell. At a particular point, the osteoclast comes in to break down and reabsorb bone cells. So the clast comes in at this particular point to break down bone cells. And at that particular point, the cell has been broken down and it gives like something like this. Let me just give you an example of how it feels. So you can see that the bone cells have been chopped off. So at this particular point, the osteoblast comes in, which are the bone forming cells. The osteoblasts form new bone cells, and after they form the new bone cell, that's when we have the osteocyte, which is called the matured bone cell. So at this point, we have this. So you can see this. You can see that we have 3 here, we have about 4 here. So what I'm trying to say is that the more the osteoblast we have, the more bone is formed, the more bone cells are formed. So if I give you an example of two different people, an 18-year-old lady and a 70-year-old man, both had an accident and they broke their legs. It's easier for the 18-year-old person to recover from the fracture than the 70-year-old person, not just because of age, but because of the fact that we have more osteoblasts in the 18-year-old person than osteoclasts. And while in the 70-year-old person, we have more osteoclasts than osteoblasts. So guys, the next thing we're going to talk about is the factors that affect bone formation. We have about 3 factors in your manual, but I'm going to put an extra one just for you to understand more of the factors that affect bone formation. The first factor is good nutrition. So we have good nutrition. So we have good nutrition. For example, excessive salt intake can interfere with calcium absorption in the body. So we are supposed to eat the right way. We are supposed to eat the right food at all times. The second factor is vitamin D. Vitamin D, it's a vitamin that we tend to gain from the early morning sunlight. So once you come out early in the morning between 6 to probably 8, that's the particular time that you can easily gain vitamin D. Some other ways you can get vitamin D is through our diet, from milk, meat, chicken, eggs, and so on and so forth. The third one I'm going to tell you is exercise. So exercise helps in bone formation. How does exercise help in bone formation? One of the reasons why exercise helps in bone formation is the fact that when you lift weights, when you do resistance training, you increase the bone density. So at all times, we always try to advise people that the reason why we lift weight is not just because of you want to bulk up, or you want to increase your strength, or you want to increase your muscular endurance, but also because if you want to increase your bone density. And lastly, just for keeps, I'm going to add disease. So disease is any abnormality from the normal state of health of a human being. So at that particular point, you are not going the way you're supposed to go. You have a deviation from your normal health. So diseases are part of those things that affect, or factors that affect bone formation. So guys, the next thing we're going to talk about is the skeleton itself and the bones in the skeleton. So before you finish this course, one of the major things you have to learn is the names of the particular bones that affect you as professionals. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the skull, which you can see upwards here. The next thing we're going to point as the mandible. That's the jaw area. So we have the mandible here. You have the skull on top, you have the mandible. Then at the center, where the chest region is, we have the sternum. After the sternum, we have the clavicle. So take your time. I said we have the skull, we have the mandible, we have the sternum, and we have the clavicle. After the clavicle, we now have the ribs. So everything here, that's the ribs. Next, by the ribs now is the upper extremities or the upper limb. So we have the humerus here. The next set of bones are two bones below the humerus, which are the radius and the ulna. And at the wrist region, we have the carpals, the metacarpals, and the phalanges of the hands. The reason I'm mentioning the phalanges of the hands is also because on the feet, we have the phalanges of the foot. Some other thing we need to remember also is at the back of the skeleton, we have the scapula. And also we have the vertebral column. The vertebral column is separated into 5 different columns, which we will talk about later in your fitness trainer certification. We also have the pelvic girdle and the lower extremities, which you should read in your manual and watch and look at the labelings that have been placed in your manual.